Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I'll talk about the HOA that wants access to my ranch. The first clue that my quiet mountain ranch wasn't going to stay quiet was the white crossover nosing past my cattle guard like it owned the place. I was halfway through welding a hinge on the barn door, spark shower cooling on the dirt, when the passenger window slid down and a woman with a steel haircut and a sun visor looked past me like I was lawn furniture. "Hi, I'm Janelle," she said, tapping a clipboard. "President of the Mountain View Community Association. We're doing our summer social at your ranch." I just stared at her for a second. In the pause, dust from the road settled on the hood of her car in a thin, gritty film. "At my ranch," I repeated. "Yes," she chirped, misreading my tone as consent. "The board agreed your meadow is the perfect backdrop. Our sponsors are excited about the photos. You'll need to let the vendor trucks in through the big gate near the aspen stand. Caterers at 8, DJ at 9, guests by noon. We'll need power, water, shade tents, and restrooms. Don't worry, we'll bring the signage. We have a brand direction this year, rustic meets modern." I shut off the welder and lifted my visor. "You drove past 4 signs that said private property. This road is not a through road. Also, I'm not in your association." Janelle didn't blink. "Everyone in our valley is part of our community," she said, like reciting a motto. "We have a neighbor cooperation policy. You can't say no to a neighbor's reasonable request. It's literally in our charter. And if you try to be difficult, I can recommend the board issue fines and pursue eviction. We've done it before." "Eviction?" I asked. "I own this ranch." She smiled, the kind that expects you to fold. "We have attorneys. My place sits above the subdivision on a shelf of land that used to be part of a cattle operation, long before the paved cul-de-sac sprouted where hay grew. The house is old, an A-frame that creaks in the wind, and the driveway winds off a county-maintained road across an easement shared with 2 ranching neighbors who use my stock tank and lower pasture for access. When I closed on the property, the title report read, "Clean, no HOA, no assessments." The only restrictions were standard county codes, an irrigation ditch easement I share with 3 other landowners, and 1 narrow right-of-way from the old days. The HOA that Janelle reigned over was technically a separate universe. Manicured lawns, stamped driveways, a clubhouse, and a quarterly magazine full of sunset photos and committee announcements. My boundary fence sits 40 yards above their back property lines, and there's a slope between us that is rewilding. Aspen saplings and wild rose reclaiming the hill. I had hoped that natural buffer would keep me out of everyone's mind. I underestimated their imagination. "Here," she said, and a man in the driver's seat handed me a folded, photocopied packet through the window. On the cover, Community Pride Agreement. Someone had highlighted a paragraph with a neon marker. "All residents within the Mountain View Valley shall support reasonable community events and hospitality requests. Declining such requests without cause may constitute grounds for fines, legal action, and/or removal from the community." "Cute," I said. "But this valley is not your legal description. And your HOA covenants don't run with my land. You don't have jurisdiction here." "Sir," she said, leaning in, "this attitude won't fly. We're trying to include you. We know your place isn't exactly," she gestured around at my barn, "on brand, but it will photograph beautifully. Think of it like public relations." A second SUV rolled up behind her, then a third. People I'd never met piled out like it was a block party. Someone in a sun hat started pointing at my split-rail fence and talking about string lights. A younger woman, all clipboard and acrylic nails, marched toward my house like she was conducting a site visit for a television show. "Stop," I said, louder than I intended. "This is private property. I'm asking you to leave." Janelle patted the window frame. "I know how this works. You'll huff and puff and then remember you're part of a community. We'll send you the logistics sheet." I grabbed my phone, hit the camera, and panned slowly. License plates, faces, my posted signs on the gate with the citation to the state trespass statute. When the man in the driver's seat saw what I was doing, he shifted into reverse so fast he kicked up gravel against his own bumper. "This is just a courtesy visit," Janelle said, a tin edge sneaking into her voice. "Don't make us escalate." They left only because 2 of my cows ambled out of the trees and stood in the road like hired security. The last I saw was Janelle's visor disappearing in a cloud of dust, her passenger waving the highlighted charter at me through the window. I called the woman who closed my loan and emailed her a photo of the Community Pride Agreement. She laughed. "They can't evict you from a place they don't govern." That's what I figured. "But I've seen HOAs do something worse," she added. They file bogus liens to clog up your title. It costs time and money to clear. You might want to get in front of them. I grew up nowhere near mountains, but I did grow up around people who thought clipboards were magic wands. After the divorce, I wanted space, quiet, and something I could fix with my hands that wasn't a person. The ranch had been owned by a man named Red who ran cattle until his knees quit. Before I bought it, Red drove me around the perimeter in his UTV, pointing with a gloved hand. "That ditch is the lifeblood. Don't let anyone mess with it," he told me. "These two neighbors get to cross here and here. Nobody else. They'll try." The day after Janelle's courtesy visit, I got a letter in my mailbox that looked official until you read it. The letterhead said Mountain View Community Association, but the address block just said Resident, Mountain View Valley. The tone was all syrup until it wasn't. "We are delighted to include your property in our annual Founder's Fete. Please confirm access to meadow areas, water spigots, and electrical service. Note, under the Community Pride Agreement and applicable neighborhood standards, refusal may subject you to a daily fine of $500 and additional remedies, up to and including eviction from the community." The letter was signed by Janelle with President under her name. The bottom had a line where I was supposed to sign as host, an initial next to each bullet point. DJ stage by the Old Elm, children's activities by the stock tank, fireworks at dusk pending county approval. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee cooling in my hands and weighed my options. I could ball that letter up and forget it, but my gut told me these folks were used to people caving because it was simpler. I'm not in the mood to be simple, so I did two things. First, I emailed a lawyer who helped me with a boundary fence issue years back when I lived in a way more crowded place. Her name is Shelby. She's a no-nonsense type who returns calls and reads every footnote. I sent her the letter, the community pride packet, and 3 photos of Janelle's caravan. I also included my title policy and the plat map Red had given me with his hand-drawn X's on the easement. Shelby called me that afternoon. "You're not in their HOA," she said, as if reading out loud from a children's book. "They have no authority. They can't evict you. If they file a lien against your title, we'll demand a quick release and file a slander of title claim. If they set foot on your land after you tell them not to, that's trespass. You can seek an injunction. And there you can't say no to a neighbor policy? At best, that's a bumper sticker. At worst, it's an attempt to coerce you into doing something you don't have to. Do not ignore them, though. Bullies thrive on silence. Respond in writing. Keep it boring and full of statutes." The second thing I did was call the county planning department. If they were truly going to try to bring 100 people onto my meadow with tents and fireworks like a wedding magazine shoot, I wanted to know what the rules were. The planner on duty, a guy named Mike, was surprisingly helpful. "Any assembly of more than 50 on private property requires a temporary use permit," he explained. "If they plan to have amplified sound, they need a noise waiver. Fireworks are prohibited outside the city and require state licensing. Alcohol sales require a license. Even if it's private, if they're charging, the rules apply. Also, we're entering high-risk fire season. The fire district and my office monitor red flag days." "Good to know," I said. "You hosting something?" he asked. "Not on purpose," he chuckled. "We get that a lot after folks from town move out near the ranches. Call the fire marshal anyway. He likes to know about people with big fields and dry grass." I called the fire district and left a message. A man named Hector called back within an hour. He asked for my address and then said, "We've seen those HOA socials. When they stay in the clubhouse, we only send an engine to do a tour and wave. When they start talking about open flames on a hill, we get nervous." "Nothing is scheduled at my place," I said, "but I have a hunch they're going to test boundaries. Post your no trespass signage with the code citation," he said. "If anything happens, call us and the sheriff. And thanks for the heads up." I typed a letter that night using half of Shelby's phrasing and half of my own stubbornness. "Dear Mountain View Community Association, your June letter and attached community pride agreement are acknowledged. As you have been advised verbally and as reflected in the recorded chain of title for my property, my ranch is not part of your association. Your covenants and policies do not apply to my land. Any unauthorized entry onto my property is trespass under state law. Cite, any attempt to place a lien or cloud my title without legal basis will result in immediate legal action for slander of title and injunctive relief. If you intend to organize an event on private property, contact the county planning department and the fire district to determine applicable permits and conditions. Notwithstanding the above, if your board insists that I cannot say no to a neighbor's request, Please find attached an event application packet consistent with county safety standards for temporary assemblies. If you complete all items at least 30 days in advance, I will consider allowing limited photo access to the outer meadow for up to 45 minutes under my direct supervision. Conditions are non-negotiable. Then I stapled the packet I had made. It was modeled after the county's permit checklist with a few extra items of my own. Proof of $2 million general liability insurance, naming me as additional insured. A refundable deposit of $20,000 to cover damage, paid by cashier's check and held in escrow. A professional security team at a 1:25 ratio. Porta-johns service that morning, plus a hand-washing station. No vehicles off the gravel. Shuttle service required, no parking on my road. Certified fire extinguishers every 50 feet around any tent. No open flames, sparklers, grills, or fireworks of any kind. Noise capped at 65 dB at my property line. Event window limited to 10 a.m., 11 a.m. Yes, I was feeling spicy. With a maximum of 30 persons, all named in advance. A signed indemnity agreement in which the association agreed to hold me harmless from any and all claims arising from their activities. I mailed it via certified mail and saved every receipt. I wasn't saying no, I was saying, here are the rules. If they truly believed in their "you can't say no" policy, they could show me how far that belief went when the logistics got real. For the next week, my road stayed quiet. I set up 2 trail cameras at angles that caught the gate and the turnout near the ditch where people tended to loiter for photos. I replaced the weathered "no trespassing" signs with new ones that included the statute number and my name, the kind that courts later like to see. My 2 easement neighbors, Bo and Cass, stopped by with coffee and shook their heads. They tried to tell me they had a right to fish my stock pond, Cass said. Said it was community water. I told them to take a long walk to the clubhouse and splash each other there. Janelle used to be fine, Bo said, but she got herself elected last winter and now she's trying to run this place like a resort. Watch your gates. The event application packet apparently did not delight them. I got an email from Events of Mountain View Community that same day. The subject line was "Unreasonable Host Demands." I read it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Your packet is not in the spirit of community cooperation. Our policy is designed to avoid exactly this kind of gatekeeping. We will not pay to use what is, for all intents and purposes, community land. Please be advised that we will proceed with our event as planned on Saturday the 3rd. We will remain peaceful and respectful, and we will not be bullied by aggressive signage or paper threats. Shelby called me again. Documented refusal to comply and an announcement of trespass, she said. Fantastic. If they set foot on your place, call the sheriff. Before that, go talk to the sheriff anyway. Bring your letters and the email. So I drove down to the sheriff's office, a tan building near the fairgrounds where the flag in front is always moving. The deputy at the desk read my packet and my letter, then the HOA email, and nodded along like he'd seen this movie. People forget that community isn't a legal boundary, he said. We'll have a car circling your area that day. Call 911 if they show up and refuse to leave. Also, file a civil standby request with dispatch now. That puts your address on the list for that date with a note. The fire marshal, Hector, met me out at the driveway 2 days before the club's announced date. We walked the fence, and he scoped the tall grass with a practiced eye. He pointed to the trees along my ditch. This is a fuse if a spark gets in, but you're in good shape otherwise. Your road is tight for big trucks, though. If they try to bring those tent trailers, they'll tear up your shoulders. I told them no vehicles off gravel, I said. He smiled. Good luck with that. On the morning of the 3rd, I woke at 5 and did my usual circuit. Check gates, top off stock troughs, make sure the ditch wasn't clogged. Fog pooled in the low spots, and the aspens trembled in a breeze that smelled dry enough to crack. I parked the truck sideways across the turnout by the ditch, a visible no-go, and set the chain across the lower portion of the driveway. The easement gate for Bo and Cass has a lockbox we all share. I slid new batteries in the keypad just in case. At 9:30, my phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. This is Poppy, a bright voice said. I'm the events chair. Our shuttle is 2 miles out. We're going to start staged arrivals at 10 sharp. We'll need the chain down. You didn't submit any of the required documents. There's no event scheduled on my property today, I said. Do not enter. It's been decided, she said, like she was announcing the weather. Also, we're bringing our own insurance. That's not how additional insured works, I said, but she'd already hung up. At 9:57, my lower gate camera pinged my phone. Movement. I pulled up the feed. The first shuttle, one of those long vans, slid to a halt facing my chain. Behind it, a line of SUVs snaking up the road, hazard lights blinking. On the van's windshield, painter's tape spelled out MVCA Founder's Fate. I called dispatch. "They're here," I said. "We have a unit nearby," the dispatcher answered. "Stay safe and do not engage if you can avoid it." Avoiding engagement was not going to be an option. Poppy hopped out of the van with a headset like she was backstage somewhere fancy, and a man I recognized from Janelle's first excursion, mid-40s, expensive haircut, started lifting the chain off the post. He had a bolt cutter under his arm. I stepped out of my truck and called, "Put the cutter down. You're on private property. The sheriff is on the way." "We're not damaging anything," he said, lifting the cutter a little. "We're removing an obstruction. Your land is part of our community. We have a right to peaceful assembly." "You don't," I said. "Please step back." Janelle stepped forward from a black SUV like she was entering a stage queue. She had a dress on that would have looked at home at a garden party, and her visor had been upgraded to a straw hat with a ribbon. "Enough," she said, tossing her hair. "We will be respectful. You will not stop us from celebrating the valley at the valley's most photogenic property. You cannot say no if you want to continue living here and not be evicted. And you are filming us without consent." "I can film my own gate," I said, holding up my phone. "I told you in writing. This is trespass." She leaned in close enough that I could see the threads of her ribbon. "We have attorneys," she said again, as if the word itself were a spell, "and friends on the county board. Then your attorneys can explain to you what happens next." The first sheriff's cruiser crested the hill with its light bar throwing color across the dry grass, followed by a second. The deputy who had helped me at the station, same square jaw, same calm, got out and tucked his thumbs into his vest. "Morning," he said to me, then to the group. "Who's in charge?" "I am," Janelle said. "We're here for a community event. We will be peaceful and respectful. This person has been hostile." "Ma'am," the deputy said, polite as a postcard, "this is private property. The owner has asked you to leave. Under state law, if you refuse, you're trespassing. If you try to cut that chain, that's criminal mischief. I'm asking you to turn your vehicles around and go back to the public road." The man with the bolt cutter looked at Janelle, waiting for a nod. She fumed quietly, lips pressed thin. Then she turned to me. "This is not over," she hissed. "I didn't say no," I said softly. "I gave you requirements. You didn't meet any of them." She gestured at the line of cars like Vanna White showing a prize. "We brought guests. We are insured. We announced it. That's cooperation." "Turn around, ma'am," the deputy said again, tone firmer, "or I start writing citations." For a handful of seconds, I thought she would tell everyone to push through. What saved us all from that circus was the second cruiser's fire engine red friend rolling up behind it with a clatter and hiss, a brush truck from the fire district. Hector leaned out the window. He didn't look like he was there to wave. "Is this the group talking about fireworks at a ranch?" he asked the air, voice normal but carrying. "No fireworks," I called out, though who knows what their vendor list looked like. Hector pointed at the slope behind my fence where the grass was a shade of gold that soaks up sparks like a sponge. "Red flag warning today," he said loudly enough for the line of cars to hear. "Any attempt to assemble here without permits will result in an immediate shutdown and a fine schedule that will not be fun." That finally did it. Janelle pulled her hat tighter and signaled to Poppy with her fingers like a third base coach. The line of SUVs started to reverse in jittery increments. It took 15 minutes to unwind the caravan. One of them backed into a post and cracked a taillight. No one waved goodbye. The van with the painter's tape lingered a moment, and I watched Poppy through the windshield. She looked like she wanted to apologize with her eyes and then remembered she wasn't allowed. When the dust settled, literally, the deputy asked if I wanted to sign a complaint. I did. He wrote down names and plate numbers from my photos. He told me I'd likely hear from the county attorney. Hector climbed out of the brush truck and stood with his thumbs hooked in his belt. "Nice chain," he said. "Caught their eye." "I didn't even have to weld today," I said. "It was going to be the hinges." "Do me a favor," he said. "If they escalate, call me first and then 911. I don't like my hills on fire." "Me neither." Shelby called an hour later. "I heard," she said. "News travels fast when a caravan tries to throw a party on private land. We're going to file for a civil harassment restraining order against Janelle personally and an injunction against the association. You gave them a path. They chose trespass. Judges love that sequence." "I keep saying I didn't say no," I said. "Exactly," she said. The emails started as soon as they got back to the clubhouse, I imagine. The tone swung from wounded, "We tried to include you," to threatening, "You have made enemies today," to bizarre, "We will hold our party on community land regardless." Then came screenshots from my trail camera of two men on foot trying my lower gate later that afternoon, gloved hands feeling for weaknesses. The timestamp put them there while the sun was still high. I texted the photos to the deputy and Hector and saved them to a folder titled Evidence. For 3 days, quiet. Then the next thread pulled loose. Water. The irrigation ditch that runs along my property is an old one, older than all of us. Its easement reads like a poem, from the spring at the foot of the aspen stand, flowing southwesterly to the lower pasture. The ditch is shallow but steady, feeding a series of stock tanks and trickling across a section of Beau's land to reach the river. Each of us has a share documented by the water court from back when that process took place in a room above a hardware store. On Wednesday, the flow in my portion stuttered. I popped the lid of the box where my headgate lives and found the slide gummed with something that smelled like sunscreen and citrus cleaner. Someone had jammed trash into the track. The water couldn't seat properly and was backing up where my bank meets the HOA fence. Downstream, Beau texted me at almost the same time. "Your headgate okay? I'm down to a trickle." It took me an hour to clean. I pulled wads of soaked paper and a plastic ribbon that looked suspiciously like it had once been attached to a straw hat. It's hard to imagine that was an accident when my gate is 50 yards from their property line and there are only 2 ways to reach it without climbing a fence: my driveway or a narrow path that starts at a trail the HOA built along their upper lots. I called the sheriff again and filed another report. Interference with a water structure. In this part of the country, you mess with water and you wake up people who usually ignore you. I drove down to the HOA clubhouse because I was tired of emails. In the lobby, a receptionist with a smile like a dentist's assistant asked if I had an appointment. "I'd like to speak with your president," I said. She looked at a screen. "She's in a board work session. Tell her the rancher she threatened with eviction is here and has footage of her guests trying to force his gate." That did the trick. Janelle emerged from a glass door flanked by 2 board members who offered me the kind of smile you hand a skunk you need to walk around. She looked tired. "Good. You need to stop harassing our volunteers," she said before the door closed behind her. "I'm here to tell you to keep off my land," I said, calm, "and to tell you someone jammed my headgate. That's a crime. Your trail runs too close to that easement. Tell your people to stay on your side of the fence." "That ditch is unsightly," she said. "We have plans to improve our trail and the slope above your property. We will need access for equipment. Then you can go to the county, file for a temporary construction easement, and pay me," I said. "Until then, no." Her eyes flashed mean. "This is why people who move here are viewed as selfish," she said. "You benefit from our community prestige, but you don't contribute." Behind her, one of the board members fiddled with a pen like he was waiting for lightning to strike. He was less theatrical than Janelle, older, with kind eyes that looked trapped. He glanced at the receptionist. She looked down at her keyboard like it had turned into lava. "Send all communications through your attorney," I said. "My counsel will do the same." Shelby's card slid across the receptionist's counter like a white flag planted in the carpet. "Counsel?" Janelle asked, as if tasting the word and not liking the flavor. "We have attorneys." "I know," I said. "You mentioned." I turned to leave and nearly bumped into Poppy coming down the hall with a rolling crate of mason jars. She flinched, then steadied. Up close, she looked less like an event coordinator and more like someone doing a job she didn't want to lose. "I'm sorry," she blurted before her boss could catch up. "I told them we shouldn't do it without permission." Janelle's voice went cold. "Poppy." But I just nodded at the younger woman and stepped aside. "I appreciate your honesty," I said. "Please stay off my property. It's a safety issue." Back at my place, I checked my cameras and found a new curiosity. A real estate flyer tucked into my gate latch. Someone had helpfully printed a glossy page advertising potential event space with unmatched views, great for weddings, with an arrow pointing in the general direction of my meadow. The listing featured a photo of my fence line in the background, artfully blurred like a lifestyle ad. The lot for sale was in the HOA, a cul-de-sac just below my hill. It didn't take a detective to see the plan. Sell lots by promising access to a community meadow. If I let them throw one party, they'd point to it forever. I brought the flyer inside, poured coffee, and took a long breath. This was not going to be solved by a single no and a few deputies at a gate. They were anchoring their sales pitch to my land. They were counting on me being too tired or too polite to push back. They were trading on words, community, valley, inclusion, like currency, and hoped I wouldn't ask to see the serial numbers. I dialed Shelby. "It's not just a party," I said when she picked up. "They're using photos of my fence in their marketing. They're leaning on this valley as brand thing. I think they need to be told with paperwork to keep my place out of their mouth." "I like when clients arrive at legal metaphors," she said. "We'll file for injunctive relief to prevent them from advertising your land as common space. While we're at it, we'll seek a civil harassment order against Janelle personally for the threats and organized attempts to access your property. I also want to send a litigation hold letter to their board. No deleting emails." "What about the ditch?" I asked. "That's a criminal complaint and a civil claim," she said. "Photograph everything. Keep samples if you can do it safely. We'll add it to the suit if we can connect it. And the real estate sheet? Send me the listing details. I'll put the brokerage on notice that any representation of access to your land is false. They won't like that. They may pressure the HOA from their side." "I'm not trying to be the neighbor who sues everyone," I said, though that ship had loaded its cargo and pushed off. "You're the neighbor who said yes if they followed the law," she said. "They said no to the law. Judges noticed that." I was grinding down a weld on the barn hinge when a White County rig rolled to a stop by my lower gate. The planner, boots with real dirt on them, clipboard steady, introduced herself as Robin and said they'd received a complaint that I was blocking a public thoroughfare. She walked the line, photographed my no trespassing signs with the statute printed right on them, traced the easement gate I share with Bo and Cass on my plat map, and nodded. "Private driveway, limited easement. You're within your rights to chain it where there's no public access," she said. Then, softer, "Off the record, we're tired of certain people treating the mountains like a theme park. We like the quiet, too." As if cued, a pack of kids at the property line started booting a soccer ball against my new T-posts. One hopped the fence to fetch a stray kick like the wire was a suggestion. I called gently for him to hop back. Cattle can kick. And a mom hustled the group away with mumbled apologies. Not everything needs a deputy, but the image stuck. When the adults pretend lines are moods, kids test them. That evening, the ridge glowed honey and the ditch whispered through the aspen bend. My phone buzzed. Formal notice of intent from President Mountain View Community. They would host their fete on community land abutting my ranch. Enter from the upper trail, as is our right. And I was prohibited from interfering. They finished with, "You cannot continue to live here if you refuse reasonable community requests." They'd learned to avoid my chain. Now they planned to stage inches from my boundary and spill onto my side. Shelby, my lawyer, emailed next. "TRO hearing Friday. Print photos, bring your signs. Wear jeans." 2 days before court, someone neatly clipped my north fence, wrapped the cut ends with blue ribbon, and folded it back for foot traffic. I stretched it tight again, crimped a sleeve, posted another statute sign, and set a sprinkler to arc across the line from 10 to 2. Fire risk down, petty mischief dampened. A homeowners forum screenshot lit my phone. Founders fate update location change. Some were thrilled about a meadow party. Others asked about permits and insurance. "All legal concerns have been addressed," a board member typed. I doubted it. In court, I kept to facts: the clipboard caravan, bolt cutter, headgate jammed with trash, the blue ribbon cut, the flyer using my fence as sales decor, the email threat. "I didn't say no," I said. I gave them a legal way to say yes. They refused. Shelby named the parts: trespass, attempted criminal mischief, interference with a water conveyance, harassment, and asked for narrow relief. The HOA's lawyer tried miscommunication and community values, then suggested the court encourage me to host. The judge asked one question that mattered: "Do your client's covenants apply to his land?" "No, Your Honor." He granted the TRO, barred them and their agents from my property, from touching my fences or headgate, and from advertising my ranch as common space. On the harassment petition, he restrained Janelle from contacting me or threatening eviction. "If they violate this order," he said, "they'll be back here quickly and unhappily." Back home, the backlash arrived fast. Anonymous numbers calling me anti-community and claiming I'd wrecked property values. I checked the fence and headgate. Both held. Then my camera caught a figure slipping through an upper blind spot and crouching at the ditch. I walked, not ran, called out at 50 feet, and the man straightened. Andrew, mid-40s, clean shirt, tote bag full of paper towels, and a zip tie he'd pressed into the slide. "Just fixing it," he said. The deputy arrived, lifted the slimy wad from the track and asked, "Fixing it with this?" An HOA golf cart materialized on their trail. Janelle driving. The deputy pointed at the restraining order's agent's language and told her to leave. Andrew rode away in the patrol car, not cuffed but not free. The HOA shifted the party back to the clubhouse. A shaky phone clip showed Janelle at a mic. "We won't be intimidated by hostile individuals who think they can wall off what belongs to all of us." Poppy followed, steady. "Please keep children off neighboring fences, no heat sources, respect boundaries." The county later charged Andrew. "I supported a deferred deal. Community service with the fire district. A stinging fine. Stay out of trouble. Leaders should carry the heavy bag, not volunteers." Greg texted to meet. At my fence, he admitted the board had chased cohesion and pride into places they didn't own. "Owners are angry, mostly about legal bills," he said. "There's a recall next week. Is no forever where we land?" I told him I'm not the neighbor who never shares. I'm the neighbor who won't be bullied. Ask in writing, with safety first and maybe. The recall wasn't close. Janelle was out. A settlement followed. The HOA adopted a boundary respect policy, built a solid slat fence on their side of the trail, retracted marketing implying access, paid my legal fees and reimbursed cameras and signs, donated their fireworks budget to the fire district, and issued a bland but public apology. I dismissed civil claims after the fence went up and stayed the harassment order so long as it was obeyed. The real estate commission fined the brokerage for the flyer. The agent called me, voice older than her years, and apologized. 2 months later, a teacher asked, politely with permission slips, if her class could learn about the ditch. Yes. The kids asked better questions than many adults. A week after, a photographer asked if a couple could take engagement photos by the fence from the HOA side. Yes. And I brought my gentlest cow to wander into frame. Since then, small supervised uses have worked. The wink and nod crowd fell silent. Consequences stuck. The HOA's insurer denied any claim tied to willful violations. A new policy requires permits and a wind forecast for events. Their legal budget line grew. Homeowners voted for grown-ups. Poppy took a job with the city parks department. The summer social stayed on their lawn. Peace, it turns out, isn't rewarding bullying. It's everyone knowing the rules without a cruiser idling at the hill. My favorite moment wasn't the gavel. It was a kid dropping off a bag of trash from the HOA trail and saying, "We cleaned it. We didn't cross." Being neighborly is a two-way gate. You knock, you ask, you listen. A fence isn't a mood, it's a line. Respect it and we can wave over it. Ignore it and the gavel does the waving for us. If you ever come by, bring boots. I'll show you the hinge I welded, the spot the sprinkler saved, and the headgate that still slides smooth. We'll listen to the hawk and the water and the quiet that follows a lesson learned. Friends, thank you. See you soon.